for the moment. I'm based in South Africa, but I would love to take this opportunity to convey the Palestinian people and leadership deepest condolences on the passing of the founding president of Namibia. We all, as Palestinians, remember him shoulder to shoulder as two internationalists with our icon leader Yasser Arafat as well.
Now, Madame Jarrar, Namibia has been a strong supporter of Palestine's rights to statehood. So perhaps we can start with you sharing how Dr. Sam Nuyoma's vision shaped Namibia's foreign policy towards Palestine.
Yes, definitely. Dr. Sam Nujoma was a leader who understood the true meaning of liberation, dignity, and self-determination. His vision for Namibia's independence was deeply rooted in the broader struggle against colonialism and oppression worldwide. We have long-standing relationship between Palestine and Namibia, between the Palestinian people and the Namibians. We are not strangers to each other. We share a deeply rooted relationship based on friendship, based on fighting against apartheid, fighting against colonialism, and fighting against oppression. Our relationship between the two leaders, Yasser Arafat and Sam Nujoma, began in the 60s and strengthened in the 70s, developed significantly in the 80s, and of course flourished and took another dimension, like more official in the 90s after the independence and beyond. We opened our embassy in Namibia only 2 months after President Yasser Arafat and leader Yasser Arafat attended the independence of Namibia. From the early days of Namibia's fight for freedom, Dr. Sam Nujoma consistently aligned the country's foreign policy, or SWAPO's foreign policy, with the principles of justice and international solidarity. This commitment naturally extended to Palestine, as he saw that Palestinian struggle is a continuation of the fight against apartheid and occupation.
How do you think, Namibia's solidarity with Palestine, as demonstrated by Dr. Nujoma, resonates with the people of the country today, with Palestinian people today?
Well, Dr. Nuyoma's solidarity and support to Palestine was never symbolic. It was moral and strategic stance that reflected a profound understanding of our shared struggles. And today, as Palestine faces ongoing occupation, displacement, aggression, and genocide, Namibia's unwavering support serves as a powerful reminder that the Namibia's fight for justice is not and was not isolated from our cause. It resonates deeply with Palestinians to know that Namibia stands despite all the odds and the difficulties regionally and internationally with the Palestinian people. It was only last year that Namibia backed the South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. And it was only last week that Namibia joined South Africa and another 7 countries in the forming the Hague group, which will supervise that Israel should be accountable for its violation of international law and international human rights. And this is like a strong evidence that the vision of Dr. Sam Nujoma is still strong in the foreign policy of the current Namibia.
Yeah. Well, rightly so. We do know that Dr. Nujoma was a fierce advocate for the, rights of oppressed people globally. So in your capacity as ambassador, Madam Jarrar, how do you see his principles influencing Namibia's diplomatic efforts in the Middle East?
Dr. Nuyoma's principles were built on solidarity, as I mentioned, on justice, on resistance to achieve sovereignty, to achieve self-determination. And all of these are values that remain central to Namibia's foreign policy, especially in the Middle East, where we can find boiling areas in different places. In the standing against, in the Middle East, I mean, Namibia's diplomacy is shaped by these ideals, and it shows that Namibia always stands against occupation, against apartheid policies, and against human rights violations. Namibia's position on Palestine is a direct reflection of its own history, because the experience or what has happened to Namibians is happening now to Palestinians. So we share the same processes, more or less, and the Namibians' independence in the 90s is still new, and the experience of the Namibians under oppression and under apartheid regime and colonization is still fresh, and it's very relevant to the Palestinian people. And we do believe that the legacy of Dr. Sam Nujoma continues today, as Namibia refuses to bow to external pressure, and instead it prioritizes justice and self-determination in its international engagements at all fronts.
Madam Jarrar, Dr. Nuyoma's leadership was pivotal in Namibia's independence, as many of us, of course, know. How do you balance honoring his legacy with the practical realities of contemporary diplomacy in the Middle East?
Well, honoring Dr. Newman's legacy means staying true to the principles of justice and solidarity, and it requires continuous vigilance against the attempts to erase the hard-earned freedoms. Dr. Nuyoma, like Yasser Arafat, they are like Nelson Mandela. They were internationalists at the time. That people at that time, they didn't realize what an international list mean. They didn't know that there are global citizens. These leaders were like this in a different time. They had a vision of a world where no nation should be subjugated, no nation should be under a regime, under apartheid regime. And today, Namibia upholds that vision by standing firmly on the side of the oppressed, always, whether it's for Palestine or any other nation. And this is reflected clearly in its policies and regulations, whether regionally, internally, or even on the international arena. I would say that in contemporary diplomacy, Namibia continues to embody these principles by taking bold stances, by talking boldly about the Palestinian people, by talking boldly against oppression. And this is reflected very clearly when it comes to supporting the South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, despite all kinds of pressure from the global actors. Namibia has refused to compromise on its commitment to justice. This is how we balance history with current modern diplomacy, by ensuring that our foreign policy remains a reflection of the values that leaders like Niyoma and Yasser Arafat championed.
Well, you touched on something just briefly there that I'd like to expand on a little bit, perhaps in your next response. So looking ahead, what role do you foresee for Namibia in fostering dialogue and peace between Israel and Palestine, particularly in the context of Dr. Nuyoma's vision for African solidarity with oppressed peoples?
Definitely, Namibia has a major role to play. We see Namibia as a small country, but it has a big role and a big voice also whether in Human Rights Council, in the United Nations, in the ICJ, in the ICC, or in the African Union as well. We see Namibia as a nation that overcame oppression, has a moral responsibility to be a voice for justice. Dr. Nayoma's vision for African solidarity with oppressed peoples continues to inspire Namibia's stance on Palestine and on different nations as well. Moving forward, Namibia can play a role in diplomatic efforts aimed at pushing for genuine peace, one that is based on international law, not those imposed settlements or settlements that has no legal base, I would say. Namibia can also strengthen African Union support for Palestine and work alongside nations that advocate for the Palestinian and oppressed people rights at international platforms such as the United Nations and the Non-Aligned Movement. I see that Namibia's role is not just about mediation, but also about ensuring that justice is at the center of any peace process that might take place. And I really salute the Namibian politicians who are always very vocal on Palestine, always, all the times.
Madam Jarrar, we thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Just in closing, your final remarks.
Thank you so much for hosting us, and we are looking for maybe attending the memorial ceremony for Dr. Sam Nujoma, as we believe that he is one of the icons, one of the internationalists, one of the leaders who stood shoulder to shoulder with the Palestinian movement, as I mentioned, especially in the 60s and 70s, 80s, up to 90s, and even his legacy also shaped and is shaping and hopefully will shape for decades to come the face of Namibian diplomacy and policies.